So the ultimate goal in meditation or any kind of consciousness work is to realize the true nature or the fundamental atomic building blocks of experience, and in turn realize what you really are at the deepest level. So if you just sit down and do nothing except to watch your experience right now, whether that's thoughts or the body or emotions, sounds, whatever, you're get to the cellular levels of experience itself and see directly the texture of experience. Like physicists, you know how they dissect atoms, right? Figure out the true nature of quote-unquote reality. But with meditation, you're doing the same thing from the inside. As you reach the natural condition of mind or reality by dissolving and transcending conditionings and concepts and intellectualization about it, nothing is solid, right? Just like how physicists say that the subatomic level, everything just vibrating energy. And the direct recognition of this truth brings upon what they call liberation. Because the only reason why you feel depressed is because you identify with thoughts, right? You identify with the body-mind, and you want to go beyond it. And most of us identify with the thoughts of the self the most. What happens when you feel anxiety and depression is that you're solidifying sensations and emotions and thoughts. You're solidifying by labeling it or creating an identity out of it, or just, you know, at the physiology level, you feel very contracted. So the whole point of meditation is to kind of deconstruct that solidity, to evaporate it. And once you start to unravel and penetrate experience this way through Vipassana mindfulness, which we're going to talk about later how to do, you see that everything is constantly in change. Everything is undulating, fluctuating, morphing, vibrating, and flickering. Right? There's no solid things or identities or entities, only processes and activities, right? That's the insight into impermanence, and there's no self to be found in this flow. And any attempt to go against this process that's just happening on its own creates a resistance, contraction, and suffering. It's not like you can even hold on to anything. You know, even trying to change something or force something to happen, it's also happening by itself. Right? And trying to hold on to things is almost like trying to grasp wind with the wind, right? It's impossible. So just let go. Even putting labels, slapping labels on things, you know, naming things, it's also a form of contraction. And people are like, well, of course I know everything's changed. Yeah, but how deeply can you see this insight? If you don't experience this at the cellular level, it's not wired into the deep structure of your hardware, it's not going to change your life. Yeah. So you're at the end, you're just going to be like, oh, you feel like you're completely still, but then your hands are moving, but you're not really moving it. Even when I'm talking around, it doesn't feel like I'm talking.
It gets real complicated.
It does, but at the same time, when you have a direct experience of it, it's actually extremely simple. When you see through it, it's actually like, oh, I can't believe I never noticed this before.
Yeah. I'm down.
Usually the entry point for meditation is the breath. And then you go onto the body, you know, you do body scanning, you know, you just kind of become aware of the sensations of the body. Once your concentration power is strong enough, you can go into the feelings and the thoughts. See, both the body and thoughts, even feelings and sound and sight, any experience at all you have, or even nothingness, are just sensations, you know, empty vibrations with no one in control. Even the act of paying attention to those sensations, or the intention of that, is the same thing. It's just sensations start just dancing spontaneously. So you can say that sensations are the atoms of experience. But again, that's just a word, right? If you are really honest about your inquiry, you see that you don't know what the fuck sensations even are, right? But it's the sense of not knowing, this inconceivable and unfathomable nature of experience that actually allows experience to experience itself at the purest level. Now, if you look at physicists, they talk about quantum mechanics, right? If Richard Feynman say, if you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. And I could say the same thing about emptiness. If you think you understand emptiness, you don't understand emptiness. Because the subtle levels of mind reality that you delve into, the more inconceivable it is. See, without any filters in the way, the universe just penetrates itself through and through like a strange loop, right? See, if your mind still thinks that you know something, trying to figure things out, right? There's still a distinction between the knower and the known, the perceiver and the perceived. the experiencer and the experienced. See, you want to collapse even that duality between who is doing investigation or meditation and the investigated, or the object of meditation. Right. So the subject in here, the I, is codependent arising with the objects out there, and neither has any inherent existence, and that's emptiness or non-duality, where everything is just one seamless whole. So when you dissolve the objects of meditation, you also dissolve in yourself. Another way to perceive non-duality is that emptiness and form are identical. What gives rise to form is just the different frequencies and speed of this vibration from empty space to form. So now during mindfulness, what you're doing is you're placing attention on sensations, any sensations at all. If you do that for long enough, they're going to start to dissolve from solid objects to like lava and liquid to like mist and air. Right? So your entire field of experience, including the body, becomes just like a cloud of sensations. So another way to put it is that training your attention by doing mindfulness, it's almost like upgrading a microscope. Right? Now you can recognize more clearly the nature of experience at the deepest level and become that. The meditation I'm talking about now, mindfulness, it's you're not trying to imagine anything or try to like create any mantras. You're just watching and observing the experience as it is. If you're feeling anxious, you just watch that. Don't try to temper with it. Don't try to change it. Don't try to label it. So when you're breathing, you just watch how you breathe without trying to change the breath in any way. And at first, you're going to be like imagining the breath. See, when you think of the breath, what do you think of? You have this image in the head of how you're breathing and your nose maybe and some air coming out of it. All that's just images and conceptions and visualizations. That's not really what the breath is. If you sit for long enough and just watch your breath, it's not the breath anymore. It's just made up of infinite numbers of particles and pixels and like grains, whatever, right? And same thing with the body and everything else in your experience, right? The way your experience is, without the mental fabrications and filters and labels of concepts or images of it, it's just a cloud of again morphing, vibratory, undulating energy. There's no body parts. There's no head, right? There's no shoulders. There's no chest. There's no fingers. No toes. That's just concepts. That's just concepts lay on top of the anatomy of the body, the image of the body that you create in your head. That's just imagined. So just the thought of this is my body, this is my hand, is already creating identification and contraction. When all that sensations are just part of the process of nature's unfoldment, right? It's all impersonal. So the names and concepts and image of the body parts, it can never contain the pure sensation of the body. See, even the physical sensations of the body or any other sensations are also being fabricated. By what? Some people say by consciousness or by God or reality or isness. I don't know if you ever put on a headset, a VR headset. It's kind of like that. It's like when you put on a headset and you look at your hands and the character in the VR set and the world, the virtual world is, virtual, right? You think your friend is insane if he puts on a VR goggle and he's like, oh, the characters in there are really what I am. And the environments in the world are really quote unquote real. But in fact, most people walking around are believing in that, right? It's almost like they're inside a dream. They don't even know it. So maybe you put on a VR set and you get some vibratory sensations of your hand when you're being attacked by a zombie or just the overall sensations of it. They're all just representations. Representation of what? Nothing. That's the mindfuckery. If you look at your hands in the VR goggle, like how some games there's like the hand of the character, and then you take it off and you look at your own hand again. It's like they're both virtual in a sense, right? Where's the distinction between that?
Oh my gosh, that's kind of cool.
So if you just sit there and examine the experiences long enough, you will arrive at the insight I'm talking about without even knowing anything about meditation.
But what if it's like super dark though?
You just watch that.
Just watch it?
Yeah. Mindfulness is just watching experience as it is. You're not trying to change it. Even if you do try to change it sometimes, it's okay. You just accept that. You just accept whatever is happening right now without any resistance. And even if it resists, that's okay too. Don't resist that. Like nature itself, reality itself is not going to label thoughts as dark or not. It's just happening, right? The only reason why we think anything is bad or imperfect is because our mind interpreted it that way. Actually, discomfort and pain are actually some of the best objects of meditation. Because the only reason why you don't feel like you're completely open, like the sky, is because of the discomfort that you're unwilling to face or feel. Right? The only way to exhaust something is to feel it out completely, and just to allow it, to accept them without any resistance, just relax into it. Right? The only way in is through. And if you sit with it for long enough, you see like alchemy, transformation taking place, where form is literally evaporated into emptiness. And this emptiness is not like nihilism, or it's not like nothingness, or it's not like something that's like bleak. It's actually also full, right? Because like it contains everything in a sense. So that's why a lot of people like equate emptiness with love. Now, I'm not saying you can't use concepts. You know, you can slap those lenses or perceptions back on once you let go of it.
Well, I guess it's like the way the animals kind of think. Because they don't label things either.
Right. So that's why it's called the natural state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's called. It's what you always are before the human conditioning start to pile up. Yeah, animals don't think of themselves as animals. They don't think of themselves as like spiritual, or like they don't imagine themselves to be like gods, or like.
Oh, okay. They're in the moment.
They're in the moment, right? I'm not saying animals are like in a non-dual state, because I don't know. I'm just saying compared to like humans are like complete in their heads, like constructing the self all the time. That creates a separation between you and the environment. Animals seems much more present, right? Yeah. Now going back to the video game or virtual reality analogy, you see everything inside the VR, right? Is sort of there but not there, right? Kind of like the rainbow, where just flickering lights. It doesn't have an actual inherent existence. There's no substance to any of it. And the exact same thing is happening right now in your direct experience. Your body and mind, the world, same hologram. Any sense of depth, distance, edges, or center is an illusion. And awakening is waking up from the identification to the main character in the video game to the entire game. In any infinite number of games you can think of, which is playing itself and is aware of itself. So in a dream, you don't know you're dreaming. But then when you wake up, you realize you're creating the entire dream. Literally waking up feels like that. And after awakening, every single moment feels like creation. It's the activity and the total exertion of the whole universe. So you wake up to the God mind, so to speak. You create all of reality. But if you think about it, the same presence is there, right? During your nighttime dream and when you wake up. Even if you reach the furthest reach of the universe, the same presence is present. So in the first stages of meditation, you're taking on the identity of this presence to dissolve the individual body-mind. At first, it's like a screen inside your head, and as you continue to unravel, the screen is expanded to the wide open sky. This recognition instantly reduces suffering because everything within this aware space is allowed, accepted, and everything is like wind blowing, right? Nothing is affected by the sky, right? And ultimately, this duality between screen and the content also collapses, so there's no more distinction, distance, or any delay between the observer, the observed, and the observation itself. So the duality between awareness and that which is aware of also gets collapsed. So ultimately, consciousness is also part of this rising and passing away. And it's also dependent on conditionings. It's also impermanent and not self. So your true nature has no shape, no form, no limitation or boundaries. So you can say that being or reality is like a cosmic shapeshifter, and because it has no dimension and no source, it can even morph from existence to non-existence, which happens every night when you go into a dreamless sleep. That's why this thing transcends even life and death. See, and even if you just turn your head for a little bit, this flux in field that simply perceives itself will never look like this ever again, because everything is in flux and nothing stays the same for more than a nanosecond. Where does this moment end and the next one begins, right? The distinction or line between the past, present, and future are a persisting illusion, right? They're all fabricated. So when you think about the past, it has nothing to do with what actually went on in the past. You know, you're conjuring up that image right now, right? So the only difference between dream, reality, and imagination is the degree of solidity. Same thing could be applied to the distinction in space. You know, where's the distinction between inside and outside? You can't find it. Right? Where does the body end and war begins? Any borders or lines or divisions separating you from the environment or between objects are just more concepts. When you investigate it closer and closer, again, there's just more vibratory sensations. This is why Alan Watts said everything's wiggly, right? Because reality really is like a bottomless pit that just goes on forever and forever, right? Because every time you find yourself standing on the ground or a line between this or that, if you examine, investigate it closer and closer, it just keeps on dissipating into air. And the air and the objects are embedded with the same knowing. They just constantly shapeshift into something else, moment to moment, right? Just like how physicists say that energies cannot be destroyed or created. You hear people in spirituality talk about the unborn, the deathless. That's what they're talking about. Right, it goes on forever. That's why it's going nowhere, and that's why you know this is it. There's nothing beyond this. So the reason why empty out the self, or dissolving the solidity in the center, is such an important notion in spirituality or in meditation is because without seeing through that illusion, this infinite shapeshifter could never realize its fullest potential. Although on the ultimate level, no matter how contracted you feel right now, or whatever form the ego mind takes in this moment, is also part of this process, because the totality of being is an inclusive experience. That's when you go beyond even the duality between non-duality and duality. So even the most mundane objects you're looking at feels like eternity just gazing back at itself. It's fucking trippy. See, even distance and directions are concepts in fabrication of the mind and images. Right? In actuality, the sensations of your face is in the same space, same condition as the sensations of your back. Right? There's no back, front, left, and right. From the non-vintage point of consciousness, sound that's coming from the right isn't really coming from the right, and neither is it coming from the left. It's coming out of nowhere. Right? That's when you're equally aware in all directions, without a location, and everything is just expanding, contracting, rising and passing away simultaneously. Okay? Even just sitting here or walking around, it just feels like I'm floating in infinite space. Like there's no ceiling, there's no ground, and there's no walls. And the sensation of the body is felt to be no different in the same space as the clouds and wind blowing and trees and birds. Yeah.
I'm trying to picture it.
Yeah, you can picture it at first, but ultimately it's a realization that isn't visualized or conceptualized. Now here's another investigation that you can do. Like if you just close your eyes in your room and you just hear a bird, but you don't see the bird, what happens? There's an image of the bird just popping on your head. Right? That's a fabrication due to conditioning. That's not the bird. Right? And you're like, oh, the sound is the bird. Okay? Really? Or is that just some sensations dancing on consciousness that you don't know what the fuck it is, really? You're like, oh, I'm sitting on my chair. Oh, the sensation of the butt pressing against the chair, that's real. Is that really the chair? After you strip away all the concepts and memories? Where's the line separating you from the chair? Where's the sensations arising out of? Nowhere. What is it made up of? Nothing. But what is nothingness? So you can just open your eyes and investigate perceptions or the visual field and see how that image is fundamentally different from memories or imaginations or the body. And you go a little deeper and ask if there is any distinction between awareness and those sensations. If not, then is awareness also just a fabrication? So you just keep going down the rabbit hole like that.
And honestly, when you say that, it makes me think about all the times I was depressed. I wasn't really living life.
Yeah, exactly. You're not living like you're living in the head.
Head.
Yeah, in the head. You're living from thought, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
waste of time, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, thoughts are okay as long as there's no thinker in there, because thoughts, thinker. The thinker is just the same thing as the ego, same thing as the self. You think you have a solidified entity in there that's creating thoughts, that's thinking thoughts. But if you look really deep into experience, that's one of the insight, is that the thinker is just another thought.
That's kind of scary.
It's kind of scary, yeah, because for your whole life you're identified with this entity that thinks, like in the center of experience, like this Frank thinking Frank thoughts. But then once you realize, wait, Frank is just another thought that's floating in the void, it could be very scary at first. Because you could experience could be like groundless. That's why a lot of people run into this thing called the dark night of the soul, where they suddenly realize that what they think they were their entire life is actually not who they are. A lot of people they take psychedelics or they smoke weed without being like prepped for it, and then they will be they'll just get thrown into this void, this infinite void, and they'll be like, holy fuck, right? And then when their ego comes back after the trip or after the meditation session's over, the ego is gonna try to like do everything in its power to try to like reconstruct itself because it's been threatened, right? The ego doesn't want to die. But then the whole point of meditation and awakening is to slowly unravel that solidity, that delusion, until you are okay with being groundless. And when you finally totally groundless, without any kind of a contractions or trying to hold on to any ground or try to struggle to create a new ground to stand on, then you're free. The ego structure is going to just start to dissolve and start to deconstruct itself on its own accord if you just sit there and do nothing. That's why it's so hard for most people to just sit and do nothing. Right? If you just tell a random person on the street who doesn't care about meditation to sit or do nothing or go to like a meditation retreat, they'll be scared. Why would they be scared? Because they'll be confronted with their own thoughts and feelings. Most of us spend our whole lives trying to run away from our thoughts and feelings, right? So meditation in a way is for you to just sit without any distractions, just observe your feelings and your thoughts exactly the way they are and just let them come out, let them come out, let them come out. Ultimately, you have to dissolve the witness too, because that's just another construct. You sort of constructing a witness. Like I said earlier, at first you're a bird, and then you construct another bird to watch that bird. Eventually, both birds have to be dissolved. Once you collapse the subject and object and reach non-duality, there's no more meditator or the meditated. Because ultimately, you're not looking at the breath or directing your attention to the breath from some place in the head, because the source of attention is illusion, right? The sensation of the breath is aware themselves exactly where they are, right? And same goes to all the sensations out there. Every sensation just liberates themselves.
But you would be conscious in that point, though.
It feels like you're not looking out through the world or hearing through the ears, because there's no thinker, hearer, doer, seer, feeler. Right? It feels like you're completely deaf and blind in a sense. But then the universe itself is aware. And a lot of religion, they say that you give yourself up for God, and that's what they mean. See, there's going to be a point in meditation where you start to Vipassanalize, or when you start to meditate on even consciousness itself. You start to investigate what consciousness is. You start to investigate what is being aware, what is doing this investigation. And then once you see through how that's just more like construct and more ground, more solidity, you just kind of disappear into consciousness. Once you disappear into consciousness, consciousness as a ground also disappears. It's kind of like, once the sky becomes the sky, or once the wind becomes the wind, it's not going to feel itself. It's not going to label itself. It's not going to conceive itself as like the sky, right? That's when you get rid of all concepts. Because a lot of spiritual cons, they get stuck in like the concept of awareness or even the conception of like consciousness, or they make that into a new thing, like the new God or the new object of fascination, or like, analyzing it. And the deepest level of this investigation, it's like you divide atoms until you can't split it anymore. So you blink out of existence, like a reset button on your entire being, and that's cessation. But we're not going to talk about this in here.
So that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask. I attempt Vipassana. I always try to do it, but I naturally gravitate towards like do nothing meditation. Like just every single time it's like effortless. I just let it happen, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, ultimately they're the same thing, because when you do Vipassana and you take it to the end point, ultimately you're going to reach, just your true nature. So you reach that space where all the traditions that talk about do nothing in meditation, like Dzogchen and Zen, talk about when they just tell you to sit there and do nothing. Do nothing meditation, one of the advantages is that it bypasses the observer, the meditator, and like, the directions of attention, which is all just more solidities that you can dissolve. It bypasses all that, and it bypasses all the mental masturbations about like techniques. Some people can get really stuck in techniques and stuff, or even theory. But Vipassana, some advantage of Vipassana over do nothing is that you're actually using the laser beam of your attention to go in there and investigate the sensations. And also like you just going in there and sort of going hard and like chipping away all the solidities and dissolve the body mind.
Yeah, okay.
So it depends on your temperament, if you like doing do nothing meditation, and you can just keep doing that. But I will say that from a lot of people, if they gear towards one thing, it's most likely the case that they need to practice on other things as well, because that's the thing that's sort of like maybe their weak link, right? It's like, when I train athletes, some athletes are like just faster and quicker by default. That's just how they're wired. And most of them need to do more squat to bring up the strength, right? Again, power is speed times strength. And those people who are just naturally pretty strong, they usually need some plyometrics and some speed work. And one of the disadvantages of do nothing meditation is that some people just don't know what they're looking for, and that they're not like applying woomph, cultivating this energy that's needed to break through the layers of delusions. Right? Imagine if you're like a berry in the mud, and then you need to like break through that in solidity in order to be the sky, right? And just cultivating energy, like doing Vipassana or like any kind of like Kundalini work, can sort of, how do I say this? Train the strength, industrial strength, to be transfer that into speed, to create power. So that's why a lot of people experience those jhanic state with a lot of energy and power when they're doing heavy industrial level concentration work. Right? So like Kundalini and jhanas, they're both the byproduct of this dissolution and the process of accumulating and cultivating the power to break through the solidity of the conditionings and the separation. But that's not to say that if you just sit there and do nothing, all those energies won't rise, all those energies won't be cultivated. So again, just mix them up. Or you can combine the expansion and the contraction by doing do nothing meditation and Vipassana at the same time, right? It's called Vipassana, which I talked about in my last video, so I'm not going to go into details, but it's basically doing it from the perspective of the panoramic non-dual awareness without a meditator.
I saw you said you do like the body scan. I feel like when I do that practice, I just feel like I'm doing it, and it's like I feel like it's like this me doing it, like going up here, going up here, going up here. Like it really feels like I'm doing the practice.
Yeah,
like there's like this me.
Yeah, there's this strong sense of a meditator. Yeah. So a lot of people don't like Vipassana because it solidifies the meditator. They feel more contracted. They feel the self more, right? But you can also use that as your advantage. Basically, you're getting triggered by doing Vipassana. Then what do? That means more of your solidity hasn't been seen through. In a really twisted sense, I think like mindfulness, it's almost like you are intentionally solidifying the observer so you can deconstruct it. Just like you're deliberately try to construct the seeker to go on this path so that the seeker can exhaust itself. Yeah, so anytime you feel like there's a very strong sense of meditator when you do Vipassana, just turn that into the object of meditation. Investigate into that. See, meditation can be perceived as the balancing act between doing nothing and doing something, right? Between restfulness and alertness, between relaxation and effort. Relaxation is your do-nothing meditation, and effort is your mindfulness or Vipassana. But they're two sides of the same coin and not exclusive, and they feed on each other. The more you can relax and the more you can expand, the more you can contract and concentrate, and vice versa, right? When you contract to nothing, smaller, quote-unquote smaller than a singularity, you also become infinity. Right? You need a certain levels of relaxation to be able to concentrate. You need to lean into it. So you can't hold boundless space or eternity without enough concentration. Right? Although again, when the universe is just meditating to itself, it's completely effortless. See, athletes, they need both speed and strength to create power. That's how you create an athletic athlete. Olympic lifters, they run sprints. And sprinters lift heavy weight, right? And if you look at the top sprinter or Olympic lifters, they're super relaxed when they're like lifting max effort weights or just sprinting at top speed. So you're just constantly trying to find the sweet spot between those two poles, right? If you get too dull, you shift gear and apply some oomph, right? Apply some concentration, right? Some energy. If you get too contracted, you relax a little bit.
So I said in my practice, I used to watch my breath a lot. Do you think I should try to do the body scan, or do you think that my practice is fine right now?
I think you should mix it up. Yeah. I think you should. I think you should do starting with the breath, and then go into body scanning for like 10-20 minutes, and then do the do nothing. Watching the breath and watching body sensations is ultimately the same thing. So Vipassana is like a more advanced version of mindfulness. It's like mindfulness on steroids. So the word Vipassana means to penetrate and investigate. Instead of just watching the breath as it is, or watching thoughts, whatever, you're actually investigating it, looking for insights. Now, when I say insights, is an experiential insight. You're like, feeling out the sensation experientially and trying to figure out the nature of it. So everything we experience comes from these portals or sense doors, right? You have seeing, that's the eyes, you have hearing, that's the ear, and you have smelling, that's the nose, and you have tasting, that's the tongue, and you have touching, that's the body sensations. Then you have the mind. And in the mind, you have thinking and also feelings. And the whole point of Vipassana is to take those different sense doors and different portals apart, deconstruct them, and see that there's nothing in the center that's holding all the stencils together. Because the only reason why we feel like we're solidified entities in the middle of the experience, experience is happening to somebody, is because of the untangled yarn ball. And imagine that you're a cat and just taking apart that yarn ball. And it's like investigating what is the nature of this yarn ball, what is it made of? What is the fundamental structure of this yarn ball? The more you untangle the yarn ball, you realize is that the cat itself is made of the same yarn. And the more that the yarn ball has been taken apart, the more that the cat has been taken apart as well, until both vanish. Now, once the yarn ball has been untangled, all the different portals and different sense doors, they're just floating in wide open space. Okay, and in the scene, only the scene. You can say sight see themselves. In the herd, only the herd. So the sounds hear themselves. And in the thinking, only the thinking. In the sensing, only the sensing. And what's interesting is that what's being experienced through those distinct sense doors is not different from the space that they're floating on. So ultimately, there's no distinction between the foreground and background of experience. There's just one singular sense door, one unified sphere. You can call it God's sense door, without any gaps or distance. So it doesn't lack anything. That's why they use the word perfection to describe the natural state.
Sorry.
Yes.
One question about the self-inquiry is, would you do that as one practice, and then would you watch the breath as one practice? Or let's say I'm seeing the breath come in and out, and then during that practice, could I ask the question, or should I keep those as two separate practices?
Both works. Sometimes I do it as a separate practice. Sometimes I just do it. I never did too much self-inquiry as like a formal practice. For self-inquiry, I usually do it with just on a bus, or like just when I'm walking around, just randomly. Just like, day-to-day life. Sometimes I'll throw in a bit of self-inquiry in my formal practices, but I also like maybe 5% of my formal practice was self-inquiry. But I did do a lot of self-inquiry just spontaneously while I was body scanning. Like you said, every time I body scan, if I feel a sense of self popping up in the center of my experience, or if I feel like a very strong sense of a meditator, I just kind of inquire into that in the background while doing the body scanning. And that just arises spontaneously. You can even do that while you're watching your breath. You could do that during the do nothing meditation as well. Yeah, they feed on each other, like concentration work and self-inquiry. The reason why you got better at self-inquiry is probably because your concentration got stronger. Because you've been doing watching the breath and stuff like that. And because you're doing do nothing meditation, you're practicing letting go and relaxing. And to be really good at self-inquiry, you need both. Yeah, so to be really good at self, you need concentration and you need to relax. And you need to abide in that space to really do the inquiry. And again, self-inquiry is just to objectify everything. I already talked about that. I'm not going to go into details, but whatever you experience or perceive, you just objectify it. Be like, oh, that's an object. That's an object. Thought is an object. Body is an object. Sight, sound, whatever. Feelings, all objects. So you're objectifying everything by labeling it as not self. Because if it's an object, it's not me, right? So that's another way to erase the subject-object duality. Once you objectify everything, the subject disappears into it. So you can say everything is the object, there's no subject, no self. Or you can say that there's only the subject and no objects. Both works fine, right? But you still have any kind of solidity in your field of experience, which is, the most efficient way to dissolve that is to Vipassana, or just sit there and let awareness dissolves it. So if during inquiry, if there's any solidity at all in your field of experience, you can't objectify it. Because any solidity is always going to be taken credit for as the subject, as the self. Even if the solidity is out there. Okay? So there's a lot of people that have been doing a self-inquiry for years and years. They're getting nowhere. Why? Because they're not physically dissolving the conditioning and solidity. So while each practice leads to the same space, when you take it to the end point, usually it's a lot quicker. For me, at least personally, when you mix it up. And because all practices, again, they feed on each other. So you gotta find the right combination. Just gotta find the right combination of diets and exercise programs to build the most efficient athlete.